Welcome back to another edition of Common Knowledge MTG, where I'm looking at some common Magic the Gathering cards, and I'm telling you, are they any good in the Pauper format or not? Can you believe this is episode 101? If you haven't watched it already, maybe go check out that 3+ hour episode 100 that I did. What a stupid idea that was. But you know what? We got to look at a whole lot of common Magic the Gathering cards, and that's just what I love doing. So let's look at some more, shall we? We will start with our first card. Scryfall, come on. There you go. Savage Gorilla. It's 4 and a green for a 3/3 ape. And you can pay Demir. Ooh, that's interesting. A blue and a black and tap. Sacrifice this creature, and target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn, and you draw a card. All right. Obviously, too expensive. 5 mana for a 3/3. Not very good. But 5 mana for a 3/3, you could use it to block a creature that the opponent's bringing in, and then you can pay and sack the creature and have a removal spell and a draw spell. That's kind of all right. If you're able to just get this thing on the table, like this could be a pretty interesting reanimation target as something to get further removal. And this card is basically everything you want in a Pauper deck in a single card. It's a creature, it's a card draw, it's removal. Those are things you like having in your Pauper decks. And the art's pretty good. It's just not a very good card though, is it? I can't really say a heck of a lot about this. It's just too expensive. It's not all that good. It's really interesting that you have to have Sultai mana basically to get everything you want to out of this card. You know, the green to play it, and then the blue and the black to use its ability. If you can't use its ability, this thing's absolutely useless to you. But if you are in Sultai already, and I guess there's some decks in Pauper that can be Sultai or have can make Sultai mana at the very least. Still no. It's obviously too expensive and too bad, but it's interesting, you know. And we like interesting cards here. I'm gonna give this thing I'll give it a 2.5, I suppose, which I think is probably a little more than it deserves, but it did get something on the interesting scale. Warmind Infantry is 2 and a red for a 2/3 elemental soldier with battalion. Whenever this creature and at least 2 other creatures attack, this creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So it's almost like a reverse battle cry. You know, this thing needs other stuff to make it better, whereas battle cry would make everything better, give a power boost to everything. Battalion, I believe, is a clan ability for Boros in Gatecrash. I was not playing during Gatecrash, but I played in the original Ravnica block, and definitely got a bunch of cards there. So Battalion was not familiar to me then, and you know what? It's not really familiar to me now. They I don't see Wizards printing a whole lot of Battalion these days. And I think it's just because it's a pretty normal ability. We have other cards that say, you know, when at least 3 creatures attack or something like that, you'll get bonuses. I don't think you need to keyword it as Battalion to get those kinds of effects. And this is a very normal effect. Having to have 3 creatures out, that's not the hardest thing to do in Pauper. It's pretty easy to make little tokens that could attack along with this guy. But you really are just getting a 3 mana 2/3 that can be a 3 mana 5/3, or sorry, 4/3, a 4 mana 4, or 3 mana 4/3. Oh, easy for me to say. And that's not that great. And all these things have to attack. It's not just an attack trigger of when this guy attacks, or if this guy stays behind and somebody else attacks, you get a bonus. And it's also pretty vanilla outside of that, you know, no evasion or anything like that. This isn't really a card that needs to go in any of your decks. Elemental and Soldier are pretty good creature types, though. You can do something with that. I just don't know if these are necessarily the colors you'd want to do for a deck like that, or using those creature types. It just kind of is in no man's land on a lot of different fronts, and I think we'll end up giving this a 1.6, I suppose. Copper Longlegs is 1 and a green for a 1/3 Phyrexian spider with reach. You can pay another 1 and a green and sacrifice this creature to proliferate. Kind of interesting. So proliferate decks are in Pauper. Generally, those will be blue and black, sometimes just blue. And you're going to try to do a lot of poison countery stuff with that and do, poison storm stuff. Green is not a terrible way of getting poison counters on an opponent either. There's lots of ways to do that, even at the common rarity. And having a creature, this is a pretty good body, a 1/3 reach, so it's going to block fairies all day, things like that. That's pretty useful. But then also being able to sacrifice it at instant speed to proliferate, that can be pretty cool too. An instant speed proliferate like that can really mess up some opponents. That can almost act like a combat trick if you have +1/+1 counters on your creatures. If you have -1/-1 counters on their creatures, you can sacrifice this guy at instant speed and proliferate those things and make the combat math very funky. Plus, you can do all the stuff with the depletion lands and of course poison counters. There's lots of ways of doing interesting proliferate stuff. This guy on his own is not all that crazy. I really don't think you're going to see it in a whole lot of the proliferate decks, but I could see it maybe being a sideboard piece in some of those decks that need to block fairies, that need to block something else that flies, a Glinthawk maybe, a Core Skyfisher. This thing can block those things as well, and that's pretty useful. So maybe as a sideboard piece that still helps you with your game plan. You can still proliferate this and sacrifice it whenever sacrifice this to proliferate whenever you need to. But it does help against some of those flying decks that can be really annoying when you let them through. I'm gonna give it a 3.7, I think, for that reason. There's probably better options available to you in a deck like that. There's probably better ways of getting rid of flyers or stopping flyers from your opponent when you are trying to play some kind of Poison Storm deck. And again, I don't think green is necessarily the color that you play for Poison Storm. I think it could be. I think you could make like a Sultai Poison Storm or probably a Simic Poison Storm, maybe. Black Golgari one I think would be a little bit more difficult, but you might be able to do that as well. Anyway, there's some options available to you, and I think this card has some potential. Dirty Were-Rat is 3 and a black for a 2/3 human rat minion. It's just a minion rat before, but they said, I guess this is human enough now. I don't know if I necessarily agree with him, but he's got arms, I suppose. It's a 2/3 human rat minion, and you can pay a black, discard a card to regenerate this creature. But it also has Threshold. As long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, this creature gets +2/+2 and can't block. Usually Threshold gives you just a straight benefit, and this one gives you a trade-off, which is interesting. So you turn this thing into a 4/5 that can't block. Like having the bigger toughness doesn't really do much for you outside of keeping you alive when you attack, I suppose. But and then you still have the ability to regenerate. So this thing, it's kind of interesting. It has a couple phases to it. Do you keep this on the board and discard cards to regenerate your guy and be able to block with him? He blocks really nicely in that way. Or do you go on the offense? Or when do you choose to go on the offensive and go, okay, I don't need to block anymore. Let's send this guy out as a 4/5. Let's get enough stuff in my graveyard. It's also an interesting way of not allowing you to just infinitely block with the guy, because you will have to continually discard cards. and whatever other cards you play that might end up going to the graveyard at some point, makes this guy less and less useful as a blocker, and then eventually not useful at all as a blocker. I like that push and pull. Now it's 4 mana for a 2/3. I don't love that. And I also don't love having to pay mana for the discard effect. If this just said discard a card to regenerate this creature, maybe we could use that a little bit more for madness capabilities and things like that. But we have other ways of discarding cards that you don't really need to play a card like this. And I think the benefits and drawbacks here make this don't do enough to make this thing all that useful. And I just don't. It doesn't have a place either. We're getting a lot of cards that kind of don't really have a place. Although I like that spider. I thought that spider was all right. Let's give this guy a 1.5. Let's Alana Informant. Ooh, a Lorwyn Eclipse card. 1 and a green for a 3/1 Elf Scout. When this creature enters or dies, you surveil 1. Pretty normal card. I know it was pretty normal when we went through all of the Lorwyn Eclipse cards at one time. I guess this will be its more official score. It's fine. 3/1. This thing's going to trade a lot in combat, and you don't mind that it trades because it will surveil 1 again, and that's okay. It could block a potentially pretty useful creature for the opponent, and this is useful in that it's useful when it dies. In Lorwyn Eclipse Limited, this was great of being a solid attacker that if your opponent decides to block, well, now you have an elf in your graveyard, and you can do lots of different things with elves in your graveyards. That unlocks a lot more things for your deck. And also with the surveil, when it enters play too, you could potentially surveil an elf into your graveyard while this thing is still on the battlefield. So it had some use in Limited. That use is, I guess, technically still there in Pauper. It's just not as useful. And we'll give it a score that is commiserate with that. Let's go for a 2. I'm going to give it a 2.7, which might seem a little high, but I think for 2 mana, halfway decent body, has an enters and a dies trigger, which is pretty good. Even if your opponent tries to cast into the fire and picks off this guy, you still got a couple of surveils out of the deal and got a removal spell out of their hand. That's not the worst trade in the world. And you could potentially trade for a really nice creature on the opponent's side. So I don't hate it. I just, it's not going to go in your deck, but it's all right. Bite Down. Have we not done Bite Down? I know we've done other bite effects, but have we specifically done Bite Down? I'm going to say that we haven't, because I would like to talk about Bite Down. Bite Down is a good card. In fact, this is one of the reasons we call them bite effects. Fight effects are where your creature deals damage to them and their creature deals damage to you, but a bite effect is just when your creature deals damage. Let's read it just to have you know. Bite Down is 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Solid. Yes, it is a pretty normal effect, especially these days. We're getting lots of bite effects that will have little extra gravy on them in some way or modality in some way. And that's nice. It's nice to have those, but there is something nice about Bite Down just normally as well. A lot of those bite effects will be sorcery speed as well, and Bite Down being an instant still has some relevance there. Now, the problem is the card that you're going to want is Ram Through. Because look at this thing. It's same mana cost, same instant speed, deals damage equal to target power, blah, blah, blah. But if your creature had trample, the excess damage is dealt to the creature's control instead. It's just a strictly better one, and you end up playing that instead. So it's a little disappointing that Bite Down, the father of bite effects, is kind of played out in Pauper. You can also get this at 1 mana, usually at sorcery speed, but you can get this at 1 mana, a single green mana sometimes, and those potentially have their place as well. But I think Bite Down is a fine Magic card. Obviously, Ram Through is the one you go with for a lot of green sideboards and sometimes even main board. But Bite Down as a solid card, I'm going to give it a 3.2. Vivian's Grizzly is 2 and a green for a 2/3 bear spirit. You can pay 3 and a green to look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker card, you may reveal it, put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, put it on the bottom of your library. This certainly was more useful in something like War of the Spark, where you had a lot of planeswalkers going around in that. War of the Spark's the one where they had a lot of uncommon planeswalkers, right? So you had more chances to hit in your deck. Plenty of creatures, maybe a handful of planeswalkers as well, maybe a couple planeswalkers, and that gives you a better chance of making those hits. In Pauper, we can make something like this work. We play cards like Winding Way and Lead the Stampede that also are very creature hungry, and you want to play decks that have a lot of creatures in them. And this is a creature as well, so Winding Way and Lead the Stampede can go find this card, which could potentially help you find more cards. And it is a form of repeatable card advantage, or at least card selection in some ways. If you want to get a creature, and you either get a creature in your hand or you scry something to the bottom and scry something that's not a creature to the bottom and give you a better chance of drawing a creature for the next time you make a draw. I like that it's instant speed. I don't like that it costs 4 mana, but I do like that if you had a ton of mana, you could just keep doing this effect and eventually put a lot of creatures in your hand. If you had infinite mana, you can put all the creatures in your deck into your hand and maybe finish up and assemble a combo that way and win the game. That's kind of cool. It's an interesting way of doing it. It's not all that great. It's 3 mana for a 2/3 bear, which also feels wrong. Bears should cost 2 and be 2/2s, right? That's all bears should do that. But I like the ability. We have other cards that do this kind of thing. White has, is it Militia Bugler? I think that's when it comes into play, but we have ways of looking for creatures. Actually, is it? Now I need to know. Militia Bugler. Yeah, that's enters. And it has some conditions on it. But there are some other ones, some recruiter kind of cards in white that can do a similar thing to this, and I believe it's generally cheaper, but you're also getting white creatures, which are traditionally smaller than green creatures, and this one more than likely is going to find some green creatures, being that you paid green to play in the first place. Cool card, a little expensive, potentially useful in an infinite combo thing, but if you already have infinite mana to do an infinite combo, you probably don't need this card to finish out the combo. There's just more efficient, better cards that can do that. Although, you play this and it doesn't get countered, even if somebody tries to cast this down and you had the infinite mana already, you could use that infinitely because this is instant speed. I don't know. Something to consider. I'm going to end up giving this a 3, and that's probably too much. I think I've said that about 3 or 4 cards already this time, but I want to be a little generous to a card like this. Again, it's interesting, and I give points for interesting. Underworld Ragehound is 1 and a red for a 3/1 elemental dog. This creature attacks each combat if able, and it has escape for 3 and a red, and you have to exile 3 other cards from your graveyard, but this creature escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. I almost feel like we've done this one before. We might have. I'll do it again because I don't remember it specifically. I kind of like this. We've talked about this a lot before. I like modality. I like versatility. I like a card that can be played in multiple phases of the game. This is a 3/1, which we just saw that elf that was 3/1 for 2 mana. That's not bad. This thing attacks each turn if able, so you're not going to be able to block with it. That does take a little bit of its value out of the way. But, okay, this thing attacks. How many times does your opponent want to take 3 damage before they go, okay, I need to block and trade with this guy? And then, okay, this guy is now in the graveyard. But now you have this escape ability. And if you put some other cards in your graveyard, pretty easy to do in Pauper, you get this guy back, and now he's a 4/2. And now your opponent has to do that mental math in their head again. Like, how many times do I take 4 damage before I go, okay, I just need to block this guy, get him off the table, and then they can just keep bringing him back. It'd be great if this thing had haste. It would be really good if this thing had haste. And that's the reason it doesn't have haste. It would be too good. But it's still pretty cool. I like what's going on here. I do. I really do. It's a little slow though, because again, you're not going to be able to attack until the next turn. You can only do the escape at sorcery speed because you're casting the creature. Creatures, it doesn't have flash at all, anything like that. So, it has enough drawbacks where I can't give it a great score, but I will give this a 2.8. Volrath's Curse is 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. That creature's controller may sacrifice a permanent of their choice for that player to ignore this effect until end of turn, and you can pay 1 and a blue to return this aura to its owner's hand. I get what they're going for here. Originally from Tempest, that makes a little bit more sense. I get it. And it's kind of fun that blue has its own pacifism. It's better than pacifism in some ways. But allowing your opponent to sacrifice a permanent, especially later in the game, they're probably going to have some extra lands that they don't need. They might have some tokens on the board that they just don't care about, especially, if you're playing against like a food deck. They just put out food tokens so quickly. Map tokens and things like that. There's all sorts of little tokens that nobody cares about, or little 1/1s that are easy to just go, I can sacrifice this guy. It's not a big deal. Sometimes they even want to sacrifice those things. So you might even be playing into your opponent's game plan, with something like the Scions, or not Scions, Spawns, the Eldrazi Spawns with the Writhing Chrysalis. Like, you don't mind that something got sacrificed. Oh no, or mono black sacrifice. They literally want to sacrifice things. It makes their creatures bigger. Some of them anyway. But I don't. It's okay. Like, it's nice that it forces an opponent to actually make a sacrifice in the idea sense, not the. I mean, also in the literal sense, they have to sacrifice something. But how worth it is it to have your creature be able to attack or block or use its activated ability? What I don't like is that it seems like they can do this at instant speed. So they get to choose. If you attack with a bunch of stuff, they go, okay, I'll sacrifice a little token, and now my big guy can block again. That doesn't feel very good. You don't really like that. But the last thing here that I do want to mention is I do like auras that are able to return themselves to your hand, both as a kind of enchantress style thing of it's nice to be able to, if you have a bunch of mana in the late game, play this, bounce it back, play this, bounce it back, play this, bounce it back, and you get a number of triggers for enchantments coming into play. I think that's cool. But it's also cool that, okay, this creature of theirs is going to die, or they're trying to sacrifice this creature to, have this drop off because they know this creature might be useless to them at that point. Well, now you can instant speed bounce that back to your hand and then have that available to you to play again on something else. It was a while ago, but I had talked about doing like a Baelmerk Leech deck. I can show you that one again. but Balemurk Leech is a card that deals a damage to an opponent, or they lose a life every time an enchantment comes into play or a room is entered into. Hopefully, Scryfall will catch up to me as I continue to vamp about what Balemurk Leech does, even though I guess I just said it all. But the idea that you could continually play and bounce and play and bounce, there we go. So like what I said, whenever enchantment you control enters and whenever you fully unlock a room, each opponent loses a life. So you have this. Oh, I thought it was a 1/1. It's nice that it's a 2/2. That's cool. You have this in play. You play this, you bounce it. You play this, you bounce it. You play this. That's 3 life that they lost just from that. Yes, it cost you a lot of mana to be able to do such a thing, but it is a repeatable thing you can do turn over turn, and if you just have a bunch of extra mana lying around, you can do it. You'd really want this thing to have flash so you could do it on your opponent's turn at the end of your opponent's turn. But I don't know. I've spent a lot of time on a card that is not very good, that has some potentially niche playability, but even that niche is extremely niche. And I think there are cards that can do that niche better than this card at the very least. Let's go for a 1.4. Yeah. Not a huge fan of it, honestly. And our 10th card of the day, Haunted Cloak for 3 mana. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it equips for 1. I've got this in at least one commander deck, maybe even a second. And I think it's fun there. It's cool. Once it's on the table, it is cool to be able to give a creature haste for a single mana. And, Vigilance and Trample aren't bad abilities either. If you have a really badass creature, then being able to just say, yep, and it has all these things now as well, is pretty cool. Pretty cool. I just like this card. In Pauper, though, I don't know. I don't think so. I think you want your equipment to give some sort of stat boost more than you necessarily want just keywords. Sure, I'm thinking about, hey, wouldn't it be fun if a Gurmag Angler had this? Wouldn't it be fun if a Solarian Terror had this? Wouldn't it be messed up if if an Ulamog's Crusher had this? And yes, the answer is yes to all of those things, but what's the opportunity cost? What are you leaving out of your deck to put this in? How does that slow your game plan down? If you put this in a Tolarian Terror deck, and you might just mill it. You might mill it to your mental note, and then it does no good to you. And it also does your Tolarian Terror no good because it's not even an instant or sorcery that helps to get your terror out faster. Those are the problems you have to worry about. Maybe with Gurmag Angler it works a little better because you could still delve that away to get your Angler out. Maybe, but they're just cards that kind of do better than this. This is a very nice suite of abilities, but it does cost a little bit too much to get it on the table. But you're spending that cost up front, so then you can have the cheap equip costs for the rest of it. I generally like those better, knowing that, hey, it's on the table. My creature is probably going to be targeted and die, and then this thing stays on the table. And now it's easier to equip. I think it's better to pay a slightly more expensive cost for the equipment up front to give you that extra value turn over turn, because your creatures will just get killed. They'll get targeted and die. Somebody will cast down your creature because it's too good, because it has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and you want your next creature to also have Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Well, it's better that they can you can get that back for just 1 mana that way. Cool card, cool commander card, less cool in Pauper, I would say. I'm going to give this thing a 2.3. Yeah. We'll do a bonus card, and then we will get out of here. Spreading Seas. What a classic. 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura that enchants a land. When this aura enters, you draw a card. An enchanted land is an island. So I have the Enchanting Tales version, and I've got it actually signed by the professor, which is pretty cool. So if I ever make a Merfolk deck that has a bunch of Island Walk guys in it, then I'm definitely putting some spreading seas in there to mess some people up. Interesting that it's banned in historic. I'm guessing there's just some really good island walk guys that maybe are abusable that way. It's nice that this thing cantrips. It's cool that I suppose this thing could fix your mana if you really needed it to be that. I don't think you really would need that because you already have a blue if you're playing this in the first place. But if you need to make another thing of yours an island, I suppose you could do that. But it is nice to put on other opponents' lands, to turn their dual land or their artifact land into just an island. Cool. You can potentially really screw up their ability to play cards that way. And then you also unlock that ability if you do have island walk creatures that you get something out of it. It's really nice that it cantrips. I think if this didn't cantrip, it would be a pretty useless effect, and it still is kind of just a generally useless effect. But if a useless effect stapled on a draw, better, better, almost acceptable, honestly. And I mean, obviously, you really need to build a deck that takes advantage of something being an island, which is mostly having island walk. But there are some other cards that I know there's some cards that say if your opponent controls an island, you have like an alternative casting cost for stuff, or you can do some things in that way. What do you give Spreading Seas? I don't know. Tell me in the comments what you would give Spreading Seas while I continue to think about this. Halfway decent effect, doesn't really move most game plans forward though. Cantrip, I don't know. Have I stalled enough for you? Let's give it a 2.5. Just kind of normal, right in the middle of the not very playable cards, rather, part of the scale. But yeah, 2.5. Not the worst thing I've ever seen. Not really a fringe player, but it's somewhere in the mix there. 2.5. Thanks for joining me. We will see you on the next one.